He has been so kindly to fly all the way from Israel and Tel Aviv to come join us. I know quite a few of you here on the front row saw him yesterday. And Gideon Levy is here now tonight, because he also is one of the holders of a mirror to his own society. He speaks where other people are silent. He dares where other people chicken out. Where other people choose comfort, he chooses truth. Journalists are also people. I hope. So, and that's why he's here now at Underreported Reality, and we call it Voices Against the Stream. So for approximately 20 minutes, he will be sharing, and after that, you will get to ask him questions. And a warm hand and welcome to Gideon Levy.
Thank you. Thank you, Oystein. First, if I may tell you, it was really a fascinating seminar today, at least until now. And I'm really grateful for being here, even as an audience, not only as a participant. There is one major difference. There are many differences, but one major principal difference between me and the two speakers who spoke before me. They fight against governments. My main fight is against public opinion, not against governments. My main problem is with Israeli public opinion, not with the Israeli governments. I mean, obviously governments have an important role, but while those people, and mainly my Russian colleague, has to fight against a very cruel, and she needs much more courage than I need, physical courage. She fights against a regime and against a government. I try to fight many times against my best friends, including in the left. It's not only about the right-wingers in Israel. In the last years, my main target of my struggle is the Zionist left, not the right-wingers. And this makes it different. I don't want to know, for sure I face much less dangers than my Russian colleague. Practically, my risks are right now minimal. There were other times, but we are not the story here. The story is, at what do we aim? And she has to aim at the government. I have to aim at my friends, at the public opinion. I'm trying to do it for many years, and I changed throughout all those years because I was once in a different position than today. My political views, my perception about Israel, about Zionism, about colonialism, about occupation changed throughout the years because I, by myself, was a typical product of the Israeli brainwash system. And a very good product. I was really, as I always say, a good boy Tel Aviv. I did whatever is expected from me. My views were totally deep inside the consensus. I was brought up not in a political home, but I for sure was not an exception in my generation, learned to believe that we are the few ones and the weak ones against the entire world, against 22 Arab countries. All of them want only one thing, and this is to exterminate us. We were brought up to believe that we are always right and the Arabs are always wrong, and we have this power because we are so moral, because we are so just, while the enemy, as we call them, have no case at all. It was really black and white in the way that we were brought up. And then, I served in the Israeli army, in the Israeli army radio station. I worked for 4 years with Shimon Peres as his advisor, and everything was ready for me to continue my life like all or almost all Israelis, with the same beliefs. And then happened something which does not happen to many Israelis, and therefore I'm so grateful of being a journalist, because it can happen almost only to a journalist. I started to travel to the occupied territories. And I did it not with a big ideology. I started incidentally. I remember very clearly the day that a friend called me and told me there is some olive trees uprooted next to Nablus, let's go and see it. And he was a member of parliament. I was a young beginner in journalism, and we went together to make a story about a woman who lost all her olive trees. And then gradually, two things happened. The first thing that happened was that I realized that there's nobody around me to tell the story. I can really gain this privilege of being always exclusive. I'm always, not always, there are a few more journalists more than today, but you are quite alone. There are not many who have interest in it. But what was much more important than this is that I realized what most of the Israelis don't, that the real drama of Israel, that the real big story of Israel is happening there, not in Tel Aviv. Because part of you have been yesterday, as I tried to claim yesterday, this defines Israel. Our backyard, not our front. Our front does not define us. Our backyard defines us. And then, really in a gradual process, I decided to dedicate my career for, first of all, covering the occupation. Many people in Israel think that I'm covering the Palestinians. No, I'm not covering the Palestinians. I'm not an expert for the Palestinians. I'm not covering the Palestinians. I'm covering the Israeli occupation. First of all, for Israeli readers. I'm covering the crimes. Obviously, I'm covering the victims. But my main focus is the occupation, not the Palestinians suffer. Not the victim is my main story. I'm not, you all go with the photo of Mother Teresa. I'm not a Mother Teresa. I don't go there to help the Palestinians. I try, as you mentioned, to put a mirror to the Israelis. Look at yourself. Look how ugly you look. Look how criminal you are. That's my main goal as a journalist. And it is different than other goals, because someone else can decide that he wants to help the Palestinians to get justice. Someone else can decide that he wants to just stand and cover the war, the conflict, the occupation. But I am trying really, and therefore I liked so much this image of putting a mirror in front. It's not much, by the way. A mirror is quite a primitive, mean, not very sophisticated. We all use mirrors. By the way, I'm just thinking about it now. When Jews are mourning about the death of some member of the family, one of the traditional habits is to cover all the mirrors at home throughout the days of mourning. I don't even know what is the source of it, but religious people cover the mirrors in the 7 days, or maybe even in the 30 days of mourning. I really think that our mirrors are covered 365 days a year. Now, this is quite a ungrateful job, and not only ungrateful job, but also quite an impossible mission. Because it's very hard to force people to see themselves as ugly or criminal or shameful. People don't like to see this side. When we look really bad, we don't look at the mirror. Usually we look at the mirror before we go in the morning, when we are nice, fresh, shaved, with the right hairdress. We don't look at ourselves when we are tired or we feel we are very fat or tired or old. Then we look less at the mirror. So Israelis don't want to look at the mirror, and it's very hard to force them to do so. And as I said yesterday, I don't want to repeat it, Israelis have also all kinds of shields to protect themselves from the mirror. Like the sheets that Israelis are putting in the mourning days over the mirrors at home, they have many, many machineries which help them not to look at the mirror or to look at a miraculous mirror which shows you in the eye. I remember when I was a child, we used to go to those Luna parks, and there were all kinds of mirrors that all of a sudden you look very big, very small, very fat, very thin. Israeli media is supporting Israelis, one of those mirrors. Look at yourself and look how beautiful you are, how young you are, how fresh you are, and above all, how moral you are. That's the mirror that the Israeli media is supplying, almost all of it, to the Israeli viewers and readership. It's very pleasant to use this mirror, but it makes your life a life in a lie. And Israelis are living in this lie. It's very hard to come and tell them, hey, the mirror you are looking at yourself is a fake mirror. But that's about journalism, isn't it? Now, the personal price in my case is much, much, much smaller than in other regimes, because, as I said yesterday as well, as a Jew who works for Haaretz, which is still the most respectful Israeli newspaper, with the freedom and the spirit of Haaretz, the personal price that I pay is quite minimal. I mean, our car was shot once, but by Israeli soldiers, but I don't think they knew who was in the car, and thanks God it was a bulletproof car. For a short while I had bodyguards after a certain article about the Israeli pilots in one of the operations in Gaza, but by and large I operate in a quite comfortable environment. And this must be said. I mean, I don't have to leave Israel. It never crossed my mind, but I don't have to go to exile. Never was it even an option. Never was it a need to do so. Surely me, my children, my partner Katrin, we pay some price. I mean, Katrin got someone in the car market in Tel Aviv had spitted at both of us, but she got much more than I got, and she deserves it, by the way, because she stands behind most of my articles. But he didn't know this, and it was unpleasant, and there were unpleasant days. We both stopped going to the Tel Aviv market a few years ago because we had enough with all the remarks and screams. Now, instead of the market, we have the social media, which is the new city market, much more vulgar, much more aggressive, much more violent than the old market. They don't spit at you physically, but what you can read there is, I mean, many times I ask myself, who are those people? But first of all, I stopped reading talkbacks almost at all. But by the end of the day, it's unpleasant, but, you know, it's not a life danger. And so what is important for me to emphasize here, because it should not be taken for granted, that even though I try to raise a different voice, go against the grain, and so far, I operate in a relatively friendly environment. Not friendly in terms that what I do is appreciated by many people, or what I do has any effect. It has no effect whatsoever. If I look back at my career, it is an ongoing, terrible failure, because everything goes to the opposite direction. In my view, Israel is today in much worse situation, and the occupation is in a much worse situation than 20 years ago. And before 20 years, it was much worse than it was 20 years before. It's getting just worse and worse, everything. But above all, and maybe this will be my last remark, above all, what makes my professional duty very hard is not only to break this iron wall of the Israelis and to get to their hearts, because I try to be also emotional, I admit it. I try to talk also to people's heart and not only to their minds. But what happens with this is that throughout time, what 20 years ago could make a big scandal in Israel, today people will even not bother yawning about it. In other words, the occupation became such routine, and the crimes became so daily that it's very hard to make a story who will really touch people. Look, I go every week, 35 years now, every week before to Gaza. Now, unfortunately, I can't go anymore to Gaza, so because of Israel, not because of Hamas. I go every week at least once to the West Bank, and most of my stories are micro stories about one victim, a child who was killed, a child who was arrested, a guy who lost his house, a guy who was beaten by settlers. I mean, all these kind of stories of victims. But the problem is that the main difficulty of the occupation is the routine life of the Palestinians. Not those outrageous events, the daily life from the morning when they wake up until they go to sleep. This is very hard to describe for an audience which, first of all, has no interest in it. Secondly, is sure that everything you say is a lie or an exaggeration. And thirdly, also, there is not enough of a drama. Okay, so they wake up in the morning and they lost their field. It's not a story. I'll give you one example, and by this I'll conclude, because I see you become nervous. In the year of 86, I first wrote about a woman, a Palestinian woman, who was pregnant, was about to give birth, and her brother and husband took her to the checkpoint. She wanted to get to a hospital in Jerusalem, Augusta Victoria. She was not far away, but she had to cross the checkpoint. She was still in pain in the car. I'll do it short. She passed 3 separate checkpoints. In all the 3 checkpoints, the soldier would not let her pass, even though her situation became worse and worse. At the 3rd checkpoint, she gave birth in the car. And then they were begging the soldiers to let her now get to a hospital. It was already 2.5 kilometers from Augusta Victoria. They wouldn't let her. So finally, she took the newborn baby and walked 2.5 kilometers by foot. It was a rainy, cold evening, and by the time she arrived at the hospital, the baby was dead. This was 86. First of all, I was sure that the story is not true. Couldn't believe that in 3 checkpoints, I mean 1 checkpoint, some sadist soldiers, but 3 checkpoints. And at this stage I was even praying, hoping that it will be denied, that there will be some proof that maybe she made it up, this whole story. But unfortunately, it was found true. Even the army at this time lied much less, and therefore they said, yes, it happened. We approve all the facts you told us, all the details. But it was discussed in a cabinet meeting. I don't want to say that Israel stopped its breath, but 2 officers were fired, not punished, but fired from the army, and people spoke about it. After this case, I covered at least between 5 to 10 more cases of women who lost their babies in checkpoints throughout the years. And story after story, I saw how the interest decreases, the reactions are almost non-existing, people are yawning and continuing to the next page, people are yawning and continuing to the things that really interest them. And I can tell you that if today, God forbid, I will have another story of a white woman who lost her baby in a checkpoint, it will not create any attention in Israel anymore. This is what happens when you are maintaining a regime of occupation which dehumanizes the other side and which makes crimes on a daily basis. When the crimes are on a daily basis, you cannot keep, and there are all those machineries who deny, who condemn anyone who dares to tell the truth. When all this is working so efficiently like in Israel, it's almost a mission impossible to really reach out to people's heart. And it's not that the Israelis are the worst people in the world, I mean on a personal basis. We're not dealing with some monsters or I don't know what, sadists. They have their bad sides, but I wouldn't say it is because of this. Reality pushed us together, and I have to mention it again and again, together with the shameful role of Israeli media, most of Israeli media, which I hope one day, somewhere, sometime, Israeli media will be brought to justice for their role, because their role is crucial in maintaining the occupation and making the Israelis so happy about themselves and so self-content and so proud about their army and about their morality and so confident that everything we are doing is right and everything that anyone criticizes us about it is not only wrong but is anti-Semite. So here I am after so many years. I must say also that the society as society, and here again I'm privileged, unlikely other colleagues in other regimes. Last year I got the highest prize for journalism in Israel. She will not get any prize in Russia. Maybe outside Russia, but not in Russia. I got it from the establishment, I mean not the government, but the municipality of Tel Aviv. I got it in Israel. So I'm privileged with all the small price I pay. By the end of the day, the real punishment that I get, or the real price that I pay, is the fact that the occupation not only didn't come to its end, but its end just getting farther and farther and farther. Thank you very much. Thank you.